It's time for the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast.
On this edition of the Kirby on Sports podcast, we break down the MLB Trade Deadline along with two teams who are starting to rebuild. We talk Washington football training camp with Natalie Kalibat of WRIC TV. We talk about the Olympics, soccer, and a huge bombshell about Lionel Messi. All that and so much more coming your way next. You're listening to the Kirby on Sports podcast.
I'm glad you connected. This is Dave Johnson, voice of the Washington Wizards. You have connected to the right place because you are listening to my man, Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast.
All right, welcome back to yet another edition of the Kirby on Sports Podcast. Before we move any further, we would like to thank our sponsors, as always, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives, in Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation. Without our sponsors and their support, the Kirby on Sports podcast would not be where it is today. So thank you once again to our wonderful sponsors for everything so far to make the Kirby on Sports podcast what it is today. Also, big thanks to Productions by Quet for our music and Dave Johnson, as always, for our intro. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot to get to, but I wanted to go ahead briefly and talk about the MLB Trade Deadline. I'm going to go ahead briefly and break down some of the big moves that were made in the MLB free agency. The free agency deadline was a little over a couple days ago as we are recording, but without further ado, let me just get into this before I get into my next biggest topic. The Baltimore Orioles give up infielder Freddie Galvis, obviously sending him to the Philadelphia Phillies in return for pitcher Tyler Birch from the Phillies. The Baltimore Orioles, obviously they are rebuilding. They are one of the worst teams in the league, and they have to make something happen. So not a lot to talk about there. You look here and you see some of the names. You have J.A. Happ, left-handed pitcher from Minnesota to St. Louis. You name it. These are only some of the moves that I'm going to mention. Daniel Norris, a left-handed pitcher from Detroit to the Milwaukee Brewers. Outfielder Adam Duvall comes over to Atlanta from Miami in return for catcher Alex Jackson. Pablo Sandoval from Atlanta over to Cleveland in exchange for Eddie Rosario in the outfield. You have Jose Barrios, a right-handed pitcher, coming over from Minnesota to Toronto. Just some of the big moves the MLB trade deadline has to offer. And I mean, the great thing about MLB, there's so many moves that have been made, and it's just exciting to watch ticking down to that 4 o'clock trade deadline. That's just some of the moves, but the two teams that we really need to talk about in this MLB trade deadline are two teams in the Washington Nationals and the Chicago Cubs. I'm going to start first with the Washington Nationals. I mean, obviously, first and foremost, the Nationals are a team I like. I enjoy watching. I'm a fan of the team, but excuse me, it's one of these things that had to be done. You look and you've seen through pretty much this entire season up until the trade deadline, the Washington Nationals can't really seem to get anything done, except for the fact that Max Scherzer comes out and consistently pitches gems for the Washington Nationals while he was there. So, obviously, as a fan of the team, I mean, I was frustrated to see so many people like Brad Hand blowing leads, and I mean, the hitting wasn't there. The Nationals, you could just tell that it wasn't like the same team you saw when they made that World Series run, if you get what I'm saying here. So, anyway, let me break this down. I'm gonna talk about the moves that were made by the Washington Nationals here in a moment. But, I mean, obviously, what can you do after a while? I mean, there comes a time where you have to rebuild. And I think that time has come for the Washington Nationals. And the Chicago Cubs, too. I'll get into that a little bit later with the Cubs. But I think the Cubs and the Nationals both have similar stories coming out of this trade deadline. And I was actually at the Cubs versus Nationals game in D.C. the day after the trade deadline ended. So it was interesting to see when all these moves happened, the style of play, so on and so forth. So, the Washington Nationals, I'm going to start with their moves. The big blockbuster, Max Scherzer and Trey Turner getting dealt to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And that just means right there, folks, if I was a betting man, which I really am not, I don't have time to look at the lines, the odds, the money lines, whatever you call it in the betting world. I'm not really that much of a betting man, but if I was, after seeing Trey Turner and Max Scherzer get dealt to the Los Angeles Dodgers, I would put a good chunk of money to say the Los Angeles Dodgers will make it to the World Series, if not win it all. I'm going to go out and say that right now because looking at this move, it was something that had to be done. It broke my heart, nonetheless. Max Scherzer gave Washington not one, but 2 no-hitters. And you see what Max Scherzer has done for this Washington franchise. It just sucks to see him go. It sucks to see him with a new team in the Los Angeles Dodgers. And hell, their starting rotation, the Los Angeles Dodgers, is that much better with Max Scherzer. Trey Turner, I don't even believe has gotten on the field for the Dodgers yet, but when he does, he'll do just as good as he was in D.C. I'm telling you, Trey Turner and Max Scherzer, it was crushing to see them go. But most recently, Max Scherzer just pitched a 10-strikeout game against the Houston Astros, which was great to see. 10 strikeouts against the Astros, who the Nats beat in the World Series. I thought that was incredible. But looking here, that was the biggest blow, I'm going to say. Kyle Schwarber, before he got injured, had an amazing home run hitting streak. He gets sent to the Red Sox. Brad Hand, I wasn't really surprised the Nats let him go because he kept blowing saves. But Brad Hand went to the Blue Jays. John Lester, former Cub, he's a veteran. I don't think he pitched that great for the Nats. He got dealt to the Cardinals. Josh Harrison, I was very surprised the Nats dealt Josh Harrison and Yan Gomes to the Oakland A's. Tres Barrera's filling in nicely for Yan Gomes, but still, Yan Gomes was a hitter. He hit home runs. Josh Harrison looked pretty good. I was impressed with how he played as a National. And another painful one, Daniel Hudson, recording the final out in Houston against the Astros to clinch a World Series title for the Washington Nationals. He gets dealt to the Padres. So that's the Nats moves, some of them, if not all of them. Let me just run down the Chicago Cubs moves also. Jock Peterson from the Cubs to the Braves. Andrew Chafin, a left-handed pitcher from the Cubs to Oakland. Ryan Teparo, right-handed pitcher to the White Sox, along with Craig Kimbrell to the White Sox. Anthony Rizzo, the Chicago Cubs first baseman, who caught the final out on a 6-3 or a 5-3 in the World Series to win the World Series. He gets sent to the New York Yankees, which will really help the Yankees in the long run if Anthony Rizzo will stay long term. Javi Baez to the New York Mets, and Chris Bryant. We were sort of expecting Chris Bryant to go out and be a part of a new team after the All-Star break. It was expected that he wouldn't be in a Cubs uniform for much longer. But the San Francisco Giants, it's incredible to see him go there. So let me just backtrack. Let me rewind a little bit to Max Scherzer and the Dodgers. Max Scherzer and Trey Turner to the Dodgers, along with Chris Bryant to the San Francisco Giants. That National League West division is looking incredible. You got the Dodgers, you got the Giants neck and neck, you have the Padres. I mean, this division is absolutely incredible. No doubt about it. I'm pulling up the standings right now as we're recording. San Francisco's in first place. The Dodgers are 4 games behind, and the Padres are 7.5 behind the Giants. It's a tight division, and going into this trade deadline, seeing Max Scherzer and Trey Turner dealt to the Dodgers and Chris Bryant dealt to the Giants, who knows how this NL West is going to look come the end of the regular season. Anything can happen between these 3 teams, the Padres, the Dodgers, and the Giants, in my opinion. And having Scherzer, Turner to the Dodgers and Bryant to the Giants, that makes these teams that much better. The Dodgers were red hot any way you look at it, even without Scherzer and Turner. But adding Max Scherzer, a multiple-year Cy Young Award winner, 2 no-hitters for the Nationals, all the accolades are there. That's going to really improve your lineup if he's coming out every 5th day and pitching 10-plus strikeouts in winning a game. And Chris Bryant, I mean, one of the best for the Chicago Cubs, absolutely, no doubt about it, for the San Francisco Giants. And, I mean, I was talking before, how are the Giants doing it? You know? They're putting out a very impressive team, almost 70 wins on the season. And it's just incredible to me. Absolutely incredible to see how well this West Division for the National League is performing and how better it's going to get come the time this regular season ends. So that's number 1. Let me talk about number 2. Let me talk about my next point here. These 2 teams, the Washington Nationals and the Chicago Cubs, I think they're on full-on rebuilding mode. And I'm going to get into my multiple points here in a moment. But first and foremost, the Cubs, it's been 108 years since they clinched a World Series title a couple years ago. They get it done. They get it done. The happiest that Chicago has ever been in quite some time with their baseball because of that long World Series drought. Obviously, you have Washington on the other side of things that keeps getting knocked out in the first or the second round of the playoffs, can never get over the hump. They beat the Dodgers. They sweep the Cardinals. They beat the Astros in 7 games. They won the World Series. DC fan base is electric. But after that, what has been happening? You have a COVID year. The Nats don't look that hot. The Cubs, losing the wild card in that COVID year, obviously. And this year, the Nats blowing saves, not playing well, bottom of the barrel in their division. It's not looking good. Let's just say that. So these two teams, the Nationals and the Cubs, are rebuilding. And they're selling the farm to do that. And I'd like to get into my next point here about the farm system in the MLB. You trade all these good players for prospects on both sides of the ball, not only for players, but you're trading for prospects as well in the minor league system. And my thought process when I hear about the minor league system is, yes, they're minor leaguers, but are they going to pan out? I heard a stat like only 1 in 10 or 1 in 15 minor leaguers or prospects have a chance to play in the MLB and stay in the MLB. If you're either one of the Cubs or the Nationals, are fans of either one of those teams, I would be kind of worried. And I'm just going to say this. Is the farm system reliable? I don't know enough about it to say if it is or not, but with that stat, I'm sort of uneasy about how they're going to rebuild in the farm system unless they keep drafting. And I'm not just talking about one or the other. I'm talking about both teams here. There's a draft that you can potentially get a star that will come up for years to come. But, yeah, I mean, in the farm system, I'm not saying it can't happen, but I'm just saying it's going to be tough. And these two teams are relying on the farm system and young talent to come up years to come. So I wouldn't be surprised for both these Nationals and these Cubs if the rebuild process won't take a while. And then you look maybe next trade deadline, you might acquire a few pieces to get your team better. But I think it's going to be a process. These teams have both won championships, and it's time for them to rebuild, retool both their teams, and try to get back to where they once were, winning a World Series. And I think, once again, that's what's great about the MLB in the trade deadline, so on and so forth. Teams might not like their current position, and they want to make a change. And, I mean, the values of teams go up and down. And it's like, what are we going to do about it? And they're either going to stay put or they're going to sell. And this is what both the Nationals and the Cubs did. And I think they're looking long-term. I think it's going to be a long-term solution. They're going to have to be bad for a couple of years in order to get back up to the top, which is all right. I mean, I've seen it before. I mean, you've seen the Cubs 109 years before making it to the World Series, winning the World Series, So it's going to be a process for both those teams, but I think they're in for the long haul. I think they are really in for the long haul, whether it's growing your farm system, drafting guys, whatever the case may be. And that is sort of my thoughts on the MLB trade deadline. But to wrap things up here, the Cubs and the Nationals made the most moves and made the most impactful moves. I mean, not just for the team, but to help the team in years to come, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how these teams pan out in years to come. But, I mean, the front office, obviously, they know what's going on, and hopefully there's going to be some sort of future in the next couple of years for these teams to make a run back at the playoffs and win a World Series. Once again, I'm Josh Kirby. You're listening to the Kirby on Sports podcast. We just talked about the MLB trade deadline and the moves that some teams made, including the Washington Nationals and the Chicago Cubs. Coming up next, my interview with Natalie Kalibat of WRIC down in Richmond. She made her trip down to Washington football team training camp. She talks about her experience there, what the atmosphere was like, and much more. Coming up next. For sports fans living in condominium and homeowners associations, as well as business professionals, when you need a reserve study, PM Plus Reserves has been in business since 1990. Their studies are accurate and easy to understand. Check them out when your association needs a study. www.pmplusreserves.com. You can also contact them at 703-803-8436. Once again, www.pmplusreserves.com. All right, it's time to shift to the local talk here on the Kirby on Sports podcast. Training camp has wrapped up for the Washington football team in Richmond, and I'm able to bring on Natalie Kalibat from WRIC TV based in Richmond, Virginia, as the Washington football team had an abbreviated training camp in Richmond, Virginia. Natalie is here to talk anything and everything about the Washington football team and their training camp, how they're looking, so on and so forth. So Natalie, thanks so much for being here. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so fun having the team here in town just for a few days. They looked really good. And as Ron Rivera said today, he loved the facilities. So he loves the resources when they come down to the Bon Secours Training Center here in Richmond.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how it gives sort of the team sort of like a different atmosphere than just staying in Ashburn, so to speak, or any team for that matter, because I know some other NFL teams move around and do some training camps somewhere else. I know obviously Richmond, the capital of Virginia, so some symbolization there, but I think it's really cool, a change of scenery. And then last year they weren't able to due to COVID. So you were out there the whole time the Washington football team was out there. So what was the vibe? What was the atmosphere like? Because I know fans were out there. They were pumped to see what this Washington football team is made of this year. So what were your initial thoughts when you saw the amount of fans, and what was your reaction?
I'm telling you, the atmosphere was electric, especially on Fan Appreciation Day on Saturday. It was jam-packed. All the fans, I actually talked to a bunch of them because I wanted to do a little bit of like a fan appreciation piece for my sportscast on Saturday. And just the fans were so excited to have the team back. Could see them from a distance, even though there's still protocols to follow. It was just so good to have the fans there, to have the team back. It just feels like things are coming back to normal. And I know Ron Rivera and the players loved having the fans. I actually bumped into Chase Young's dad, which was pretty awesome. So I was talking to Greg a little bit, and he loved just being able to be there and watch his son, because especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, there were, some restrictions for even some of the family members. So everyone loved being there, and it was just such a fun and high energy environment. And it was hot. It was really hot.
I can imagine. I can imagine there. But going back to COVID-19, I know there were some restrictions in place, but the Washington football team found sort of unique ways to engage the fan experience in terms of, because COVID-19, you couldn't really interact with the players, but they did have some stuff. I saw like a virtual after training camp. Fans can go up on Zoom and ask their favorite player a question. And did you see anything else in terms of fan experience to cater to sort of the fans with this pandemic other than that?
Honestly, there were a lot of things like that, right, where fans could kind of get a one-on-one interaction with guys via Zoom. it was so fun to just be out there and see, team president Jason Wright was dancing from a distance, showing the fans. And Ron Rivera was obviously very present. He would wave from a distance, he would talk to fans from a distance. So you could just really see how personable a lot of the coaches and the players are and how much they really, really miss and wanted that one-on-one interaction because they could still do it from a distance, or you could wave. Ryan Fitzpatrick would wave when he would come off the field to all the fans. So it was such a cool environment. It was really cool to see how the team was able to get creative with how they interacted the fans and the players and the coaches.
Yeah. So it's interesting because Ron Rivera coming into this camp, he was sort of disappointed, and I don't want to discuss this for too long, but based off of his cancer and how he's immunodeficient, he was upset because the Washington football team is one of the lowest vaccinated teams. That number could have raised by now afterwards. But with his concern and I saw press conferences and stuff about, is this player vaccinated? Why is this player not vaccinated? Was there kind of a tension over this vaccination at training camp? Because I know this team has gone through a lot, and I feel like stressing over vaccinations and over what people choose to do, did that sort of cause some drama during training camp? Did you see it?
Honestly, I didn't see any tension. I think if anything, there's a lot of respect. And I think Ron Rivera himself, he was open to the fact that he's vaccinated, but he's also respectful and understanding to the players that might have personal reasons why they're not. And it's actually very interesting. The week before training camp, I think another 10% or so of the team did get vaccinated. So I think slowly but surely, a lot of the players are, deciding maybe they want to get vaccinated or maybe they don't. And I do have to say, it doesn't seem to be a concern with the season. The guys are really focused and they're going to get the job done this year. So a lot of positivity just coming from camp and how the team is projected to be this season.
Yeah, and NFL protocols are strict when it comes to COVID protocols, because if you're unvaccinated and you cause an outbreak, your team could potentially have a forfeit. So that's something that not just the Washington football team, but any team in the NFL has to worry about, because if you're not vaccinated, the front office, the coaches, whoever's in charge of this stuff needs to make sure that those players are following protocols. If you don't want to get vaccinated, fine, play for us, but do what you're told and don't do anything stupid, because there could be a point, God forbid, that somebody could cause a COVID outbreak and there would be a forfeit.
That's right. So the NFL has some pretty strict COVID protocols, and knock on wood, none of them are caused by the Washington football team. So I'm hopeful that the team will just, do what they have to do on the field and take care of what they need to off the field and get that done.
Yeah, and there was also a mini outbreak of COVID down there, if I remember correctly.
It seems that maybe a few guys tested positive after camp. So I think they'll be quarantining. And I guess it's better to run into this problem now than during the season. So it seems like the team's taking care of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once again, Natalie Kalibat joins us. You can follow her on Twitter at Natalie Kalibat. Once again, right here on the Kirby on Sports podcast. So
beautiful pronunciation. Got to give it to you. It's not easy.
Yeah. It's a very unique name. I will say that.
It is. Yes.
So, okay, let's move into the actual training camp. You were there all the days and whatnot. So I want to get your thoughts. What did you see from the players? What did you see from the coaches? What was their mindset going into training camp? What was their energy like being back on the field in front of fans?
I'll start with the energy. Every guy talked about this. Ron Rivera talked about this. They were so happy to be back there. And obviously in Richmond, we have a huge Washington football fan base because we're so close you can almost throw a stone, right? It's so close right down I-95. So a lot of the coaches, a lot of the players were just so excited to be there. And I think having the fans there in person gave them an extra boost, right? Because you have people there cheering you on. And last year we did not see that. And so I think it was a feeling of grateful and thankfulness from the guys and the coaches and the players and everything. The team overall, I think everyone's looking pretty good. I know it's early. Training camp last week, they didn't have pads. So, just seeing some drills and kind of watching practices every day. But one thing I love about covering training camp and covering the Washington football team, there's so many local guys, right? Guys with local ties. So I was able to sit down with Jimmy Moreland. He played locally here at JMU. And then you have Taylor Heineke, who played at Old Dominion. So getting to catch up with guys that have local connections and are now playing professionally for our local team was really fun to catch up with those guys.
So were there any players on a broad spectrum that really stood out to you that you were paying attention to during certain drills? I mean, I know it really might not mean much yet because it is training camp and they're just practicing getting back into the swing of things. But was there anybody who caught your attention during this training camp?
I think Terry McLaurin looks fantastic. Obviously Chase Young is expected to have a pretty lights out second season. So I'm excited to watch him. It's hard to pick certain guys just because it was only a short amount of time, but I think there's there's some high expectations, and I think these guys can really, really, really make it happen this season. I'm excited to watch Ryan Fitzpatrick. The fans were obviously very excited to see him in town there as well from a distance.
Is there a prediction from you, Natalie, on whether Fitzpatrick is getting the week one nod or there's going to be a continuing quarterback competition and somebody like Heineke or maybe Kyle Allen, I'm not really sure his status, could take that QB1 going into week one?
Yeah, you got to love the quarterback battles, right? They're always happening. I think you never know, right? Someone could change your mind, right? And be the starter. I think Kyle Allen is still recovering from his injury. But in terms of Ryan Fitzpatrick and Taylor Heineke, I think, Heineke has what it takes to he obviously did an incredible job last year to prove himself. And I think Ron Rivera sees a lot in him. And, Ryan Fitzpatrick may be the week one starter, may be looked at as the week one starter. But I definitely think if Heineke is thrown in, he can absolutely execute the way he did last year.
Because this quarterback room is unique. You have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who has played for every team you can name of just about. And then you have Taylor Heineke coming in and losing in the wild card game by 8 to Tampa Bay. And Taylor Heineke, he came into this season looking built, more muscle, which is a good thing for somebody who was pretty small last year. But anyways, getting to my point here, whoever the starter might be, if it's Taylor Heineke, he has a veteran in Ryan Fitzpatrick that is there to coach him along the way. Or if Ryan Fitzpatrick gets the starting nod, you have Ryan Fitzpatrick leading the way and Taylor Heineke looking up to Fitzpatrick as a veteran in this National Football League to maybe grow him to get him better to the point where he takes the starting reins.
Amen to that. It's a win-win either way, right? Just the way you put it perfectly, that regardless of who's starting, I think, there's a great positive to look at either way. And I know, Taylor is very humble and very modest in regards to his, just, I guess, outlook on the season. So, of course, he looks up to Ryan Fitzpatrick, but he's also focused on his game, and trying to do the best that he can and develop that leadership role the way Ryan Fitzpatrick has. Obviously a veteran guy walking in, you earn that respect just by the numbers that you've been in the league.
Absolutely. So I want to shift to the receivers. Diami Brown, brand new draft out of North Carolina, with Curtis Samuel, who came over from North Carolina. And then you have Terry McLaurin, who had such a great season. A lot of weapons. What did you see from that wide receiver core out there?
Had a ton of weapons, and I love that, right? It's such a great thing to have so much versatility in that regards. And I will say this, Terry McLaurin, he did photo bomb Jimmy Moreland and I when I was doing my one-on-one with him. He popped in and was, hanging out and from a distance. So that was kind of fun, tons of personality. But I think he's looking really strong. Obviously, he has a lot of experience, and I think he'll really be playing lights out this season.
It's amazing. Whoever the quarterback might be, you have weapons to throw to, because last season for the Washington football team, it seemed like the only weapon was Terry McLaurin. Not to mention, I totally forgot to mention Logan Thomas, who just got extended too. Those seem to be the only two
Virginia
weapons.
Tech
You have
guy.
Logan Thomas and those receivers I just named. It's going to be a deadly squad, I think. Can you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. I'm so glad you brought up Logan Thomas. He's a Virginia Tech guy, so another local guy that, earned his stripes, right? Just got a new deal and is absolutely earns it.
I think it's incredible how Logan Thomas went from a decent quarterback at Virginia Tech to a tight end who is buff, built, and can make plays. And I've seen that last season from the Washington football team and how great Logan Thomas did. And he deserved that extension. And I think he's going to push just as hard this year.
He absolutely did deserve that extension. And that just plays to his athleticism, right? Just being able to go from quarterback to tight end. I mean, that's not an easy transition. But it just goes to show you how smart of a football player, how high of a IQ he has on that playing field.
Absolutely. So looking at the defense wreaked havoc for the Washington football team last year. They picked up William Jackson III from the Cincinnati Bengals. Landon Collins is finally healthy. So, I mean, first and foremost, how did Landon Collins look? Because that injury last year was gruesome. Do you think he's ready to play? Because for the New York Giants, he caused havoc on multiple teams I've seen. And I think Landon Collins can really do a number on opposing offenses for the Washington football team.
Yeah, Landon Collins is an absolute beast. I'm super excited to watch him play. And he's actually one of the guys that, we heard from during training camp. And he's someone who I believe leads by example out there, right? It's not only about what you're doing on the football field, but it's also how you're leading this team. And I am super excited to see what he has in store, because I know he's going to come up big for Washington this season for sure.
And don't forget about the defensive line, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Daron Payne, you name it. I just think they're getting older. I mean, last year they were young, but they're built older by season, more experience. What's that D line going to look like? I need your thoughts on that.
It's going to be scary. I'll tell you that. You almost, when you see these guys out there at first, you almost don't even recognize them, because so many of them focused on getting bigger, getting stronger in the offseason. Like you mentioned, Heineke, putting on weight in a good way, right? Putting on that muscle. So I think, like you said, Montez Sweat, Daron Payne, Chase Young, these guys are scary. I wouldn't want to go against them. So from what I saw in camp from those guys, they're looking good. They're looking ready to go. And I think you can just feel the energy. These guys want to get through camp, and they want to get rocking and rolling.
I want to ask one more thing.
Sure.
Did you see Weston Schweitzer at all? How did he look?
Very briefly. Very, very briefly. And from what I saw of him, I was very impressed. I think, things are looking pretty good, but I didn't get to watch him as closely as some of the other guys.
I mean, I'm not sure if you've seen the videos, but he's out there yeah, like just squatting 850 pounds on a dumbbell, just crunching together a bunch of weights, like 600, 700 pounds, and just easily picking it up. Like, I'm like, this man can maybe pick up 1,000 pounds. I think I saw those videos. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And he's on the Washington football team. It's like, oh my man, I think he's ready to go.
It's incredible. Yeah, the amount of strength that man has is just absolutely mind-boggling, and I'm sure he will transition and execute that on the field just beautifully this season.
Do you have a prediction on the record for the Washington football team for this season? I know it's early, so we won't hold you to it, but that, and do you think they make the playoffs this year?
Gosh, a prediction this early. I wish you could ask me this in a week. Right? Let them get a little more of camp under their belt. I do think they can make the playoffs. I'll tell you that. I do think they can make the playoffs. How about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, they have a lot to work on still, because I feel like the front office situation and stuff is starting to get behind them. If it's more of Ron Rivera and the front office, Martin Mayhew, Marty Herney, making the decisions, because I mean, they changed the culture. That front office was terrible maybe 3-4 years ago with Jay Gruden there. No doubt about it. You're just having a terrible culture. You bring in a new team president, so on and so forth. Marty Herney, Martin Mayhew. Just let Ron, Martin, and Marty and Jason make the decisions. And I think that's the first step. In the next step, they got to limit injuries, because you've seen in years past where the Washington football team has so many people injured that you don't know who's coming on the field come week 17, now week 18 with the schedule extension, the one more week in the season. But I think it's pretty hopeful from what I'm seeing so far. It's still early, but if they can stay healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 9-10, maybe 11-win season.
I agree with that. I think that's very good. I think it's a little early to predict right now, but I'd say that's pretty safe.
Hey, I can respect that, because I don't want to hold you to that or anything like that. I know that. But
no, a 9-10 win season sounds about that's safe. That's safe.
Heck, if Natalie Kalibat loves my prediction, I'm sure I'm off to great things.
I definitely think so. That's right.
Absolutely. Natalie Kalibat from WRIC TV. Natalie, it was great chatting with you. Let's do it again sometime soon.
Let's do it. Thanks a bunch. I appreciate you having me.
Is it finally time to upgrade your home's interior? How about with an authentic farm table made locally from recycled barnwood? Shenandoah Primitives, based right here in Winchester, Virginia, makes farm tables, benches, tables, coffee tables, and a long list of other items for your home decorating needs. At Shenandoah Primitives, function and style are combined for great furniture that will last generations. If you're interested in combining the industrial look of metal with wood, or considering something incredibly unique with a live edge, Shenandoah Primitives turns those ideas into reality. Thinking about a mirror, wine rack, or other accent piece for your home, Shenandoah Primitives can assist with that as well. As a local small business, Shenandoah Primitives is happy to work with each client for a custom design or schedule an appointment to come out and view current inventory. Local, high-quality, handmade items can be found at Shenandoah Primitives. Find us on Facebook and Instagram, or visit us at www.shenandoahprimitives.com. Once again, that's www.shenandoahprimitives.com. All right, welcome back. Thank you once again to Natalie Kalibat of WRIC TV, based in Richmond, for hopping on the Kirby on Sports podcast with us, talking about the Washington football team training camp. a lot more to get to here on the Kirby on Sports podcast. Time to talk some Olympic sports. The Olympics are well underway, and what a time it's been. It's been a fun experience. I've caught some of the sports, not everything. We'll have a special guest talking about some United States women's Olympic soccer here in a little bit. But for the most part, it's back in Tokyo. But some controversy with gymnast Simone Biles. She recently just came back, but I mean, she had to withdraw from an event about maybe a week ago, and people were speculating that maybe it was injury, something like that. But it ends up that she was focusing on her mental health, which I respect a lot. You gotta take care of yourself before you can perform and do anything, sporting event wise. You know, because I feel like that's very, very important, because if you're not mentally focused and you're not in the right mindset, you can't perform to the best of your ability. And some people might disagree. This is the biggest stage. Why isn't Simone Biles out there? Heck, you got to focus on yourself before you can go out and perform. And she ended up coming out and on the beam event, and she actually won a medal, if I remember correctly. But I think there was a lot of pressure on her, being the Olympics, so on and so forth. And once again, it's all a mental game, and it's just very interesting to see the news unfold about Simone Biles. Obviously, I'm hoping she's doing better, and she'll go out and compete still. But if you have to get help for whatever it is that you're going through, get help, because the most important thing is in sports. I mean, it's going out and competing, but you have to be mentally healthy in order to do it. So if you have to get help, get help. I respect the fact that she dropped out, because if you aren't mentally healthy, then you're not going to perform to the best of your ability. And I mean, God forbid what happens after that. So obviously, I respect it. I'm glad she's all right. Before we move any further, though, let's take a quick break to hear a message from Dr. Dave Miles.
Hey, sports fans. Thank you for listening to and supporting the Kirby on Sports podcast with founder and host Josh Kirby, along with lead contributor Dan Dembski. Like, subscribe, and give them a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcast from. My name is Dr. Dave Miles, founder of Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation. Our company helps leaders build engaged and productive teams. Exclusively for listeners of the Kirby on Sports podcast, you can take an opportunity to discover your primary communication style and learn more about effective communication with others. Text Kirby to 757-903-0743 for your free copy of the Working From Home Communication Assessment, where you'll learn your primary communication style, how to better communicate with others not like you, and tips on working remotely based on your personal communication style. 10 minutes, tons of resources. Learn about yourself and your team. Again, text Kirby to 757-903-0743 for your free assessment report today. I'm Dr. Dave Miles, founder of Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, where we help you and your team be more engaged and productive by understanding each other better. Back to you, Josh.
All right, joining us now to discuss more Olympics and other soccer news, notes, so on and so forth, our guy, Carlos Martinez. Football's right around the corner, Carlos, but we seem to be grabbing you for all these other segments. I mean, you're like our utility player on the Kirby on Sports podcast. Am I right here, Carlos?
I'm a man of many talents, my friend. I follow many sports, and football season's around the corner, but we're talking about a different type of football today.
Football.
Yes.
Yes. Football.
Yes.
Okay. So let's dive into it. The United States men's It's very interesting. I did not know this when you told this to me, and I wanted to do some more research on it. Obviously, they did not qualify for the Olympics, but they won 2 trophies in their region, the CONCACAF and the Gold Cup. In the Gold Cup, they beat Mexico 1-0. 2 very important wins for the United States that solidified their chance in clinching a berth into the World Cup. This World Cup is going to be very interesting because you have the United States in 2022. If they get into the World Cup, that's going to be even bigger hype because the year after that, if I remember correctly, the United States is hosting the World Cup in 2028.
2026 we'll be hosting the World Cup.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it'll be a collaborative effort, I guess you could say, with Canada and Mexico, because they're going to host some games too, but a majority of the games are going to be played in the U.S. It's a big deal because we're about to start World Cup qualifying next month. And considering the fact that we didn't qualify for the World Cup in 2018, the fact that, we beat, the top dog here in our region in Mexico with essentially a B team, C team, with a bunch of players that aren't playing for like the big European clubs like our A team does. It's a big deal because it shows we have a lot of depth, and the fact that our A team also earlier this summer beat Mexico also 3-2 in the Nations League final. So things are looking very good for the U.S. men's national team right now.
Yeah, they seriously are, I think, as of right now. But I mean, yeah, it's very confusing how this all works. These different leagues and tournaments they go in, and this all equates to somehow you make it into the World Cup or not. Can you sort of explain how this works?
So so you just got to see it this way. So like, there's the World Cup, which has every team in the world, right? Every team tries to get a position in that. Only 32 nations make it, right? So you have to go through qualifying. Each region gets a certain amount of teams that go in, right? So like our region gets, I believe it's 3 teams, and then 1 team goes to a playoff with another region. I believe it's the Oceania. I don't remember which region it is, but we go into a playoff, and whoever wins that game gets into the World Cup. So ultimately that equates to 32 teams getting into it, plus obviously the host nation automatically qualifies. So in 2026 we're already in that World Cup. But with the World Cup next year in Qatar, we have to go through qualifying. So basically, like, the Gold Cup is like our version of like the Euros that happened this summer, or the Copa America, which happened down in South America. That's our version of it. And it's basically just a tournament to figure out like who's the best team in the region. That's it. It's like a miniature version of the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you were saying earlier, Carlos, Mexico is like the top dog. And for the United States to beat Mexico with their backup players, essentially, it's a very big statement, and I'm sure that's going to go into a lot of consideration moving forward into the World Cup and who is picked to go based on standings and other stats, I assume.
Yeah, well, we will be playing Mexico twice in World Cup qualifying. We'll play them in November here in the U.S., and then we'll play them again in March in Mexico, in their huge big soccer stadium, the Estadio Azteca, which is awful to play in. So it'll be interesting seeing what happens going forward and how Mexico really responds to the fact that they lost twice to the US A team and then the B team, when they had all their best players on the field also.
Absolutely. So shifting our focus from United States men's to United States women's, going right back into talking about the Olympics, the defending World Cup champions, and they were expected to win the gold medal, ended up going out with bronze. What did you see from the U.S. women's team? Because obviously they have a really great squad. They had a great squad in the World Cup, but obviously there's an issue about the players aging and if that talent is going to get replaced by younger talent, so on and so forth. I see that happening, in my personal opinion, that these players, these World Cup players, are not going to have that long to go because age is a factor in soccer, one of the most aggressive and like challenging sports, because you're on a pitch for 90 minutes running up and down, trying to get a soccer ball into a goal. So obviously that's something to take into effect. But what did you see from United States women's in the Olympics so far?
I mean, they just didn't look like themselves, to be completely honest. From the moment that that they got to the Olympics, they just seemed tired and heavy and just not loose and creative like they normally look. I mean, they started out the tournament by losing 3-0 to Sweden, the team that knocked us out of the 2016 Olympics. This was supposed to be a kind of redemption Olympics for the U.S. Women's national team, because obviously in 2016 in the Olympics in Brazil, they went out in the quarterfinals. They didn't even medal. And they were favorites, of course, again, to win the gold medal. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on this team because of how successful they have been, but they just didn't look like themselves. They weren't creative in the middle of the field. It was a lot of long balls over the top, and ultimately that led them to lose to Canada for the first time in a while, in the semifinal match. And they did a lot better, obviously, this go around and with these Olympic Games, because they got a bronze. But it is definitely disappointing because they didn't get the gold medal. And when you're the defending World Cup champs, and you've been successful for the past 10 years, it's kind of disappointing. But I mean, a bronze medal is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a medal that they're going home with, a great accomplishment nonetheless, but it would have been so much better for them to get gold. But I mean, losing to Canada, that was a long time coming. They haven't lost to Canada in who knows how long, and then ended up beating Australia for the bronze medal. So I was very surprised that the United States lost to Canada in that match, though. Really surprised.
Yeah, it was a very weird game. I mean, obviously, it's kind of hard to watch these, Olympic soccer games because they happen so early in the morning, but I'm able to catch, a little bit of them. But like from what I could see, they just never really got going. The U.S. Women's national team is usually a lot more creative, a lot more intimidating, I guess you could say, and they just look tired. It just looks like everything finally has caught up to them. And like you said, a lot of the players that have gotten this, that have contributed to the success of this women's national team are starting to age out. A lot of them are in their 30s at this point. And right now they're in this weird position where they're in this transitional like phase where they're starting to phase out these older players that got them to the dance, and they have to now start to implement younger talent to try and replenish the pool of players. It's a lot like where the US men's national team was going into the 2018 World Cup, where they didn't qualify. They were in a weird spot, because a lot of the players that had gotten them there, or that had gotten the U.S. men's national team to like the success that it kind of was, even though they've never won a World Cup, they were starting to age out, and we were starting to bring in this younger talent that shows a lot of promise but hadn't developed yet. It's kind of the same thing with the women's national team right now. They're in that same spot.
So it must not be easy for national team like the United States, who just recently won a World Cup a couple years ago, to go about finding talent to replace the players who could be on their way out the door due to age and other factors. What's the best way to describe the process in going about finding new players that fit their system well, so on and so forth?
Well, the good thing about the women's national team is it feels like they're their process is a lot more streamlined. You know, they're able to identify talent, and they're able to bring the talent in at younger ages. You know, that, you know, a lot of these players that are on the national team now have been playing with each other for pretty much their whole lives. You know, the women's national team really is, you know, like where you spend a lot of time with your national, you know, with the national team, with the women's national team. With men's, it's different, you know, like you obviously have to like look, it's a lot more complex system with the men's national team, but with the women's national team, it's not hard for, like, they have plenty of talent in the wings coming up. You know, obviously, you know, we have a women's soccer league here in the United States, and obviously Europe has their own stuff going on too that has a lot of the US players there too. So they're able to identify talent pretty quickly. And the thing about the US women's national team is they adapt to whatever they have. That's why we've won the past 2 World Cups. And why, you know, and in 2011 we were in the final, but we lost to Japan. So, I mean, they're just in a weird phase right now. It'll be interesting to see where it goes going into the World Cup in 2023.
Yeah, it definitely will be interesting come 2023 if they have another shot to win yet another World Cup, which would be electric if they do. Moving right along, a bombshell. Nothing to do with the men's or women's national team, but a bombshell. Lionel Messi will not be returning to his FC Barcelona. And wow, what a bombshell. What a bombshell this is.
Yeah, it was massive. Obviously, throughout the day, we were getting reports because that they had not agreed, or that they were very far apart in their negotiations, and that it was looking like they weren't going to come to a deal. But in reality, that wasn't the case. It's more of there's some rules in place with the Spanish league because that are limiting Barcelona from being able to sign Messi to this new contract that would keep him in Barcelona for the foreseeable future. So right now, Barcelona right now it's not really like official that Messi's not coming back. Right now, Barcelona are putting that out there to try and get La Liga, which is the Spanish league. They're trying to get them to. They're basically trying to call their bluff and see if they will change the rules because, you know, Messi's the biggest star in that league, and to lose him would be huge.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You look at Lionel Messi, a long time coming. He just won his first international tournament with Argentina in the Copa America, which is huge for a player like Messi, who has been talented for most of his career. And to see a person like Messi leave because of this rule, if they don't change the rule, viewership might go down. I mean, hell, I don't know much about international viewership of La Liga or whatever that league is called. But I mean, I know one thing: if your star player leaves due to a rule on spending, so on and so forth, the viewership's going to drop. If Lionel Messi actually leaves, the team he goes to next is going to be very interesting to see. That fan base might skyrocket, explode because of the fan base, the atmosphere that Lionel Messi brings. He is a talented athlete all around, and he's been exceptional to watch on the soccer pitch through the past couple of years.
Well, if he does leave Barcelona and he does sign somewhere else, chances are he would probably go to Manchester City because that's where Barcelona's old coach, Pep Guardiola, coaches now. And that was the guy who really unlocked Messi's abilities as a player. But, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's played his whole career for Barcelona. I mean, Barcelona was the team that discovered him. He came up through their youth system and really came to and got bumped all the way up to the senior team and really made an impact. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's played 778 games, scored 672 goals, 305 assists. I mean, he's won 10 La Liga titles, 7 Copa del Rey titles. I mean, 4 Champions Leagues. I mean, this this is a guy you cannot lose, especially in the position that Barcelona is in, because there's a lot of financial turmoil with that club. They need Messi, to really put butts in seats to help Barcelona get out of their financial situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree more with that. So, if he doesn't go to Manchester City, do you see him going anywhere else?
Probably Paris Saint-Germain to go play with Neymar. That would probably be the next logical option. Those are the only two clubs I can really see him going to. He has said before that he does want to come play in the MLS one day. I don't think it would be right now, but we could see Messi come in that contract that he was supposed to sign with Barcelona. It was actually put in that he was that after a few years he would go play for Inter Miami for David Beckham's team. So, but no, Kirby, we won't see him play for DC United, unfortunately.
This is a very dumb question, but if we ever saw Lionel Messi in DC, what would that do for the fan base?
I mean, the DC United fan base is pretty enthusiastic as it is already. I mean, we had Wayne Rooney at one point, which was freaking awesome when we did. If Messi came to DC and was wearing, the DC United colors and all that stuff, I mean, every game would be sold out in that stadium and at Audi Field. And Audi Field is a beautiful stadium, by the way. It would explode.
So are you strictly international soccer, or can you get behind DC United? Because I mean,
I am a DC United fan.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were or not, because
I love DC United. I've been to multiple games.
I've never been. I would really love to go. I've never experienced MLS soccer, which
it is a great time.
It's something I want to cross off my bucket list.
Audi Field, which is like right down the street from the National Stadium, or Nationals Park. It's literally right down the street. It is a beautiful soccer stadium. Last game I went was like literally right before everything locked down to COVID. It's a beautiful, beautiful stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fan base for MLS games, I mean, they could get pretty rowdy as well, I would assume. But I mean, nothing in comparison to like international soccer, like La Liga and
leagues. Some of the atmospheres are pretty crazy. I mean, you got the teams in, like, you got the Seattle Sounders, over there in Seattle. They play in the Seahawks stadium and they pretty much sell out every game. Same thing with, you got Portland, you got I'm trying to think of another team right now. Yeah, you got Seattle, Portland, you got Kansas City.
Atlanta?
Oh, Atlanta. You got Atlanta United.
Atlanta's pretty darn good.
And the thing is that a lot of these teams now in MLS are not playing in football stadiums, aside from Seattle, who I just mentioned, who play in the Seahawks stadium. They're starting to build their own little, their own like soccer specific stadiums, which are a lot smaller, more intimate. They're not holding 80,000 fans, like a football stadium does. They're holding 20,000, along those lines, because it just makes the game a little more intimate, and it's pretty nice.
Absolutely. Carlos Martinez joining us here on the Kirby on Sports podcast, talking anything and everything soccer, from the Olympics, not to the Olympics, and to some big bombshells. Carlos, we always appreciate the utility that you bring to us, covering multiple topics at multiple different times here on the podcast. The NFL is right around the corner. We look forward to being with you, talking football with you then, my friend.
Well, I guess, do we want to break the news now, or are we just going to wait?
The news.
The news. The three-man booth is coming back, pal.
Oh yeah. Is that news? Yeah. We're back again, folks. The three-man booth is coming back.
Except this time we're coming back for the whole season.
The whole season. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, because last year we only came back for certain weeks, and then we came back for the whole playoffs. But this time we're coming back for the whole season.
It's going to be really fun, folks. Stick with us right here on the Kirby on Sports podcast for all of that down the road. Carlos, as always, we appreciate the time, my friend, and we'll be talking soon.
Yes, sir. It was good to see you again, Kirby.
All right. We will be wrapping things up on the Kirby on Sports podcast right after this. All right. Big thanks to Carlos Martinez for coming on, talking shop, soccer, Lionel Messi, the Olympics, so on and so forth. Man, what a utility Carlos is. And he will be right back for the NFL season right here on the Kirby on Sports podcast. As we wrap things up, as always, big thanks to our sponsors, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives, and Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation. Make sure you find us on all social media platforms and all streaming platforms, along with our website, www.kirbyonsports.com. Until the next time you hear us, always remember to create greatness. So long, and peace out.